The grand hall of the Nexus gleamed under the soft light of artificial stars, stretching across an expanse so vast it felt like an entire galaxy contained within four walls. Alien representatives, each more exotic than the last, hovered in groups, their forms shimmering with an air of superiority. Humanity's presence was sparse but powerful, a subtle reminder that Earth was no longer the weakest player at the table. Captain Mara Ellis stood at the edge of the room, scanning the crowd. She adjusted her uniform, the fabric fitting snugly against her frame, every inch of it a testament to the discipline she demanded from her crew. As Earth's leading officer at the summit, she was a figure of calm, yet beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Earth had made a name for itself over the last century. Humanity's military might was on the rise, but not all were pleased. Mara could sense the hostility in the room, feel it crawling under her skin. "Captain Ellis," a voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find General Sorak, a towering figure from the Taurian Dominion, his violet skin a striking contrast to the polished metallic interior of the hall. His sharp eyes glinted with curiosity, though there was no mistaking the subtle sneer pulling at the corner of his mouth. Taurians were known for their military prowess, and their arrogance matched their reputation. "General," Mara said, offering a polite nod. "What brings you here?" "I assumed you'd be in the war room with the rest of your delegation." Sorak chuckled, a low rumble that echoed off the walls. "I prefer to keep my eyes on the real negotiations. Diplomacy's for the weak." "I see," Mara replied, her tone controlled. She couldn't help but feel the sharp edge of his words. Diplomacy was humanity's strength, but it seemed not everyone in the galaxy shared that view. As the discussion about trade routes and security began, Mara took a seat at the table. The Council had called this summit to discuss the future of galactic security. More accurately, they called it to remind Earth of its place. A few years ago, humanity's military might have been on the fringes, unnoticed. Now, with the construction of Earth's new flagship, the Conqueror, and the establishment of its first deep space defense fleet, Earth was no longer a fledgling species waiting for permission. It was a power, and the Council didn't like it. Zorketh, the High Elder of the Galactic Council, took his place at the head of the table, his thin, bony fingers steepled in front of him. His pale, scaled face was inscrutable, but Mara knew the cold calculation in his eyes too well. He didn't just want Earth's compliance, he wanted Earth's subjugation. For too long, the Council had treated humanity like a resource, something to be pacified and controlled. Today, that perception would change. "We begin this summit," Zorketh's voice echoed through the room, "with the assumption that all delegates are here for peace. But we must remember the delicate balance of power within the galaxy. Any disruption will be met with consequence." Mara's jaw tightened. The threats were subtle, but they were there. No one in the room had missed the veiled warning. It wasn't peace they sought, it was control. Earth's growing strength was an inconvenience to the Council's long-established order. The representatives from the Zethran Confederacy, a race of bird-like beings, exchanged knowing glances. Mara caught the quiet mutterings between them, whispers of Earth and difficult. The Zethrans had never been particularly fond of humanity, viewing them as too unpredictable. Their leader, Allura, caught Mara's gaze across the room. Her beady eyes narrowed slightly before she turned away. Mara wasn't here to make friends. She was here to ensure Earth's survival, its independence, and its future. But the path ahead was narrow, and every step she took was fraught with consequences. Zorketh cleared his throat, pulling Mara back to the present. "Humanity's request for autonomy in defense matters," he began, "has raised serious concerns. The Council has deliberated, and the decision is clear. Earth must adhere to the terms of the existing treaties, limiting its military advancements to ensure galactic harmony." A murmur ran through the room. Mara's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. She had expected this. The Council wanted Earth's technological advances, but they didn't want humanity to hold too much power. A neutral military force, one that posed no threat but also could be easily controlled, was their ideal. But Earth would never accept such limitations. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but firm. With all due respect, High Elder, Earth will not be submitting to any terms that limit our ability to defend ourselves. We have earned the right to stand on equal footing with the rest of the galaxy. The room fell silent. She could feel the tension rise, the eyes of every species in the room locked on her. Zorketha's gaze flickered, a brief moment of uncertainty passing through his eyes. Then, his smile returned, cold, calculating. You misunderstand, Captain Ellis. This is not a matter of respect. This is a matter of survival. The balance of power cannot be disrupted by your impulsive decisions. Mara felt the weight of the room's judgment, but her resolve didn't waver. Then you leave us no choice but to act on our own terms. Earth will no longer bend to the will of the Council. We will stand as equals, or not at all. Zorketha's eyes flashed, a momentary spark of anger before he masked it with his usual icy demeanor. So be it, he said, his voice low and threatening. But do not think for a moment that the galaxy will allow your defiance to go unchallenged. Mara didn't respond. Instead, she turned to the others seated at the table. Humanity's fleet is ready, she said, her voice cold and unwavering. We will defend our sovereignty, whether you agree with us or not. The room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Outside, the stars continued to burn, silent witnesses to the beginning of a new era. An era where humanity's voice would no longer be ignored. Mara stood, straightening her uniform, her eyes meeting Zorketha's one last time. You may have controlled this galaxy for centuries, High Elder, she said, her voice quiet but resolute. But those days are over. And with that, she turned, walking out of the hall, leaving the galaxy to wonder if humanity had truly just abandoned the table, or if it was the table that had been left behind. Mara stood in front of the observation window, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The stars seemed to blink back at her, silent and indifferent. Below, the Conqueror glided through the black, its sleek, formidable frame cutting through the silence like a predator waiting for its moment to strike. She clenched her fists at her sides. It had been hours since the summit, and the weight of the decision she had made still sat heavily in her chest. Earth had pulled out. There was no turning back now. Behind her, the soft hum of the command center filled the air. General Darius Cole, her most trusted advisor, stood near the holotable, examining tactical readouts with his usual intensity. He had been silent since the meeting, but she knew his thoughts mirrored hers. The Council had overplayed its hand. Humanity would not bow. Not anymore. Captain, Darius's voice broke through her thoughts. We've decrypted the message you intercepted. It's as we feared. Mara turned, her brow furrowing. Explain. The Council's planning a preemptive strike against Earth, Darius continued, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the revelation. Their intelligence suggests that humanity's rise is a threat to the galactic order. Zorketha's been playing both sides, making promises of peace, but preparing for war. Mara's heart skipped a beat. The Council wasn't just talking about restricting Earth's power, they were preparing to erase it. This wasn't diplomacy, it was a death sentence. Do we have proof? She asked, her voice calm, but the tension in her gut threatened to break through. Darius nodded, tapping a button on the holotable. The image of an alien warship, sleek and ominous, appeared in the air. They've mobilized a fleet in the outer sectors. The Revenant is leading it. They plan to strike Earth within the next 3 days, after the summit's conclusion. This isn't a negotiation anymore, Mara. It's war. Mara's mind raced, but her body remained still. The pieces were falling into place. Zorketha's subtle threats, the Council's insistence on Earth's compliance, it was all part of a larger scheme to weaken humanity. They had underestimated them. They had underestimated her. She took a deep breath, focusing. What's our status? The fleet's ready. We've got the Conqueror fully operational and the rest of the defense fleet standing by. We can retaliate, but, Darius hesitated. This is bigger than just us. If we attack, we risk igniting a war with every faction in the galaxy. Mara's gaze never wavered from the holotable. We didn't start this war, Darius. They did. And if we don't act now, they'll see us as weak. Earth won't survive another century of submission. We've fought too long for this moment. We'll be outnumbered, Darius said, his voice edged with caution. The Council's fleet is one of the largest in the galaxy. We don't need to match them ship for ship, Mara replied, her tone cutting through the room like a blade. We need to outsmart them. We're going to use their own tactics against them. Darius raised an eyebrow. Go on. She stepped closer to the table, pointing to the fleet's movements. We'll deploy the Conqueror as a decoy. It's our strongest vessel, but it'll draw the bulk of their fire. Meanwhile, we'll hit them with smaller, faster ships, quick strikes, disrupt their command structure, and create confusion. The Council's fleet is big, but it's cumbersome. We'll break them apart, one ship at a time. Darius studied the layout for a moment, nodding slowly. It's bold. It's risky. That's why it'll work, Mara said, meeting his eyes. Risk is the only thing the Council doesn't understand about humanity. We'll fight like cornered animals, and we'll win. The war room was bustling with activity, the sharp sound of commands being relayed through comm systems, the swift shuffle of officers coordinating their tactics. Mara had given the orders, but it was the crew of the Conqueror that would carry them out. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reviewed the fleet's final preparations. She knew the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a military engagement. This was humanity's declaration to the galaxy that it would not be ignored. Captain, we're ready for departure, Darius said, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of tension. The fleet's in position. Mara stood tall, her posture straight and unyielding. Then let's move out. As she walked toward the command deck, she passed by her crew, each one of them caught in the same storm of uncertainty. Yet there was no hesitation in their eyes. These men and women, the best humanity had to offer, were ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them. The command deck was quiet, the atmosphere thick with the anticipation of what was to come. Mara sat in her captain's chair, the familiar weight of the position grounding her. Helmsman, set course for the outer sectors. Full speed. Aye, Captain, the helmsman replied, his hands flying over the controls. Communications, open a channel to the fleet, Mara ordered. This is Captain Ellis. Today, we are not just defending Earth. We are defending our right to exist on our terms. The Council has chosen this path. Now, we make them regret it. We fight for every human who ever lived. Let's show them what happens when they push humanity too far. The crew's response was immediate, a unified chorus of "Aye, Captain." Mara's gaze lingered on the stars outside the viewport. They were so close now, the edge of the galaxy in their sights, the distant expanse a reminder of how far humanity had come, and how much they had to lose. The first strike came swiftly. The Council's fleet had anticipated Earth's move, but they hadn't expected humanity to hit back so quickly. The Conqueror engaged with precision, drawing the enemy in, while the rest of the fleet executed their flanking maneuvers. Explosions rippled through space, brilliant flashes of light marking the beginning of a battle that would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. Mara's fingers gripped the armrests of her chair as the ship rocked under the force of the battle. The hum of the engines, the crackle of weapons fire, the frantic communication between crew members, it was all part of the symphony of war. But Mara had long ago learned how to listen through the chaos. Every action had a rhythm, every battle had its pattern. She just had to find it. Report, she snapped, her voice cutting through the chaos. 2 enemy ships disabled, Captain, Darius replied. But they're regrouping. They're not giving up without a fight. They never do, Mara muttered. Let's make them regret it. As the battle raged on, the tides of war shifted with each maneuver. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for a future they would not allow anyone to take from them. The galaxy had underestimated them. But it wouldn't make that mistake again. And as Mara watched the explosions light up the darkness of space, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had proven that they were no longer anyone's pawns. The galaxy would know the price of crossing Earth. The shift had begun. And it would never end. Mara stood at the heart of the command deck, the flickering holocom readout casting an eerie light across her face. The battlefield stretched out before her, an intricate web of movement and chaos that only she seemed to understand. The Conqueror was holding steady in the center of it all, its weapons systems tearing through enemy lines with cold, precise efficiency. The Council's fleet was staggering, struggling to keep up with the unpredictable tactics humanity had unleashed. The silence of space was broken by the steady hum of the ship's systems and the sharp bursts of comms activity. The tension was palpable, but for Mara, it was the calm before the storm. The enemy fleet, much larger in numbers, was beginning to regroup. But they had underestimated the human will to survive, and that would be their downfall. "Captain," General Darius Cole's voice crackled through her earpiece. "We've disabled their command ship, but they're pulling back. It's not over yet." Mara didn't flinch. "Good. Let them retreat. The Conqueror stays in position, but we don't engage unless they give us no choice." "But Captain..." "Trust me," Mara cut him off, her voice steady. "We're not done yet. If they retreat too easily, they'll never respect us. We need to keep pushing. We'll make them think they've lost before we finish them off." Darius didn't argue, though Mara could hear the skepticism in his silence. She had seen it in his eyes earlier, when she had laid out the plan, how the Council's fleet would never give up without a fight. And here it was, right in front of her. The enemy, regrouping and preparing for their final strike. But humanity wasn't going to go down that easily. Not today. The bridge of the Conqueror was alive with activity. Crew members moved with practiced precision, eyes glued to their stations, their movements sharp and quick. It was all happening at once: explosions, tactical maneuvers, enemy ships disintegrating into plumes of smoke and debris. Yet, even amidst the chaos, Mara maintained her calm. She knew what was at stake. A soft ping interrupted her thoughts. She turned toward the comms officer, who was looking at her with wide eyes. "Captain, we've intercepted a message from Zorkath," the officer said, voice trembling. "He's calling for reinforcements. It's a large fleet, Captain. He's planning to launch a final assault." Mara's jaw clenched. Reinforcements. The Council wasn't going to give up that easily, not after everything they had invested in this. Zorkath had underestimated them, but now he was fighting for his life, and the life of the entire galaxy. "Time to make our move," Mara said. "Relay the orders to the fleet. We're not waiting for their reinforcements to arrive. We hit them now, before they have a chance to regroup." On the battlefield, the stakes were higher than ever. The Conqueror had already taken significant damage, but its weapon systems were still firing with deadly accuracy. Mara had calculated the risks, but even she knew that this battle wasn't going to be easy. Every ship in Earth's fleet had to be in perfect sync if they were going to stand a chance. "Captain," Darius's voice came again, urgent. "They've launched their final wave. We're facing their full strength now. If we don't act fast, we'll be overwhelmed." Mara's eyes hardened. The enemy fleet had begun to form a defensive line, their strategy shifting into a more aggressive stance. They had no choice but to engage now. She gripped the armrests of her chair, pushing herself up. "Launch all ships. We take them head-on." As the orders went out, the sound of engines powering up filled the room. The Conqueror surged forward, its hull vibrating under the immense force of the battle. Mara stood tall, her gaze fixed on the battlefield, calculating every move. The stakes were higher now. The Council was no longer just a political opponent, they were an existential threat to humanity's future. And Mara Ellis would not let Earth fall. The first volley hit with a brutal force, shaking the ship to its core. Mara steadied herself against the tremor, her eyes narrowing. This was it. The final push. The holodisplay flickered as enemy ships circled, closing in around them. The Conqueror was surrounded, but Mara wasn't fazed. She had anticipated this move. A small smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. The Council's fleet, despite its numbers, had one fatal flaw: it relied too much on brute force and too little on strategy. "Fire all forward weapons," Mara commanded, her voice a sharp crack in the tense silence of the bridge. The ship's cannons unleashed a wave of energy, slamming into the enemy ships. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the fallout. Explosions erupted across the field, the shock waves reverberating through space like a final warning to the Council. Humanity would not back down. "Enemy forces are breaking apart," the comms officer announced. "They're in disarray. Some of them are retreating." Mara's heart raced. She had expected this. The Council's fleet was strong, but it was fragile. Once their command structure had been shattered, their resolve would crumble. "Do not let them escape," Mara ordered, her eyes fixed on the screen. "We finish this now." The remaining enemy ships began to scatter, retreating into the vastness of space, but they couldn't outrun humanity's determination. The Conqueror led the charge, closing in on the remaining ships with surgical precision. With each strike, the Council's fleet weakened, their once imposing strength dissipating like smoke in the wind. It didn't take long before the last of the enemy vessels were reduced to debris, their fires flickering out in the cold void. The galaxy's once mighty defenders were gone, and humanity stood victorious. The silence that followed was deafening. "We did it," Darius's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 battles. "We actually did it." Mara exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of relief. The tension in her shoulders slowly melted away. They had won. Not just for themselves, but for every human who had ever dared to dream of something more. But the victory came with a heavy price. The battle had been brutal, and humanity's victory was hard-earned. The galaxy had been shaken, and things would never be the same again. "Send a message to the galaxy," Mara said, her voice low but resolute. "Let them know we're not just surviving. We're thriving. And Earth will never again be anyone's pawn." As the message was transmitted, the stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter. The galaxy would remember this day. Humanity had made its stand, and the universe would never forget. The silence was oppressive. The battle had ended, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Mara stood on the bridge of the Conqueror, staring out at the now quiet expanse of space. The wreckage of the Council's fleet floated like broken remnants of a once mighty force. It was over. But what came next? "Captain," General Darius Cole's voice broke through the quiet. "The Council is requesting a transmission. They want to surrender." Mara's eyes flicked to the holodisplay, which blinked in response to the incoming call. The face of Zorkath appeared, his expression a mix of rage and disbelief. For the first time, Mara saw him as something other than a faceless enemy. He was a broken man, a leader who had underestimated humanity and now paid the price. "Mara Ellis," Zorkath said, his voice dripping with venom. "You've destroyed everything. We had the galaxy under control, and now, you've ruined it." "I didn't ruin it," Mara replied coolly, her eyes never leaving his. "You did. You believed you could dominate humanity, and now you're reaping the consequences. The Council's rule is over." Zorkath's eyes flickered, as though he were calculating his next words. "This isn't over, Captain. You may have won a battle, but the war is far from finished." "War?" Mara scoffed, her voice filled with disdain. "The war was over before it began. The galaxy no longer fears you, Zorkath. You had your chance, and now it's ours. Humanity's future is ours to decide." Zorkath's face contorted, his lips curling into a sneer. "You think you can control the galaxy, little human? You think you can build an empire from the ashes of the old? You're naive." Mara's gaze hardened. "I'm not naive. I'm human. And we don't back down from a fight. But what you don't understand, Zorkath, is that we don't need to conquer the galaxy. We just need to show it that we're no longer its servants." The tension between them was palpable. The high walls of the command deck felt even more suffocating in that moment, but Mara didn't flinch. She wasn't here to make bargains or play games with a leader who had failed. Humanity had proved its strength. The galaxy had seen it. And now the universe had to reckon with the new order. The communication cut off abruptly, leaving a lingering sense of finality in its wake. Mara took a deep breath, turning away from the holoscreen. The crew around her continued their work, their focus unwavering, but she could see the strain in their eyes. They had just won the most significant battle in human history. But the hardest part was still ahead. Darius approached her, his face grim. "Captain, we need to discuss the next steps. The Council's surrender is not enough. The galaxy is in chaos. Some factions are already preparing for the power vacuum. Others are making their own moves. We can't just walk away and assume everything will settle on its own." Mara's gaze shifted to the stars outside, the vast emptiness that stretched for light years. The galaxy was a complex web of alliances, grudges, and fragile peace treaties. With the Council's collapse, it was inevitable that every faction would try to carve out a piece of the void left behind. And humanity? Humanity was now the biggest player on the field. "We need to be smart about this," Mara said, her voice low but resolute. "We won't make the same mistake the Council did. We won't force ourselves on anyone. But we'll make sure no one forgets what happens when they try to stand in our way." "Are you suggesting we take control?" Darius asked, his brow furrowing. "I'm suggesting we lead," Mara replied firmly. "It's not about domination. It's about setting an example. If we show the galaxy that humanity can lead with strength and honor, others will follow. The time of the Council's tyranny is over. A new era is beginning." The following days were a whirlwind. The Conqueror remained in orbit around the central system, its formidable presence a silent reminder to the galaxy of humanity's power. Mara issued a series of messages to every major faction, announcing Earth's new role in the galaxy, a neutral power that would help broker peace, but would never again be subjugated. But not everyone was so easily swayed. "I can't believe you're seriously proposing this," Admiral Rilke of the Zethran Confederacy said, her voice laced with skepticism as she stood before Mara in the war room. "Humanity's involvement will only create more chaos. The Council may be broken, but that doesn't mean you can replace them." "We're not replacing anyone," Mara replied coolly, her gaze unwavering. "We're offering something the Council never did, a chance for the galaxy to rebuild. We've been in the shadows for too long, Admiral. Now it's time for humanity to step into the light." Rilke shook her head. "You think the galaxy is ready for your light? You've made powerful enemies today. There are factions who won't stand by and let you take control, not without a fight." "We're not taking control," Mara reiterated. "We're offering unity. But if they don't want it, they'll be forced to deal with us. That's their choice." Mara's words echoed through the halls of the Conqueror, but there was a deeper truth she couldn't ignore: the galaxy wasn't ready for peace. The factions that had once been kept in check by the Council's iron fist were now free to pursue their own ambitions. Some would seek alliances. Others would make war. And Earth would be in the center of it all. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't going to let the galaxy fall back into chaos. Earth would lead, not by force, but by example. They would build a new order, one based on mutual respect and strength. But the cost of this new beginning would be high. The galaxy wasn't ready for the peace they offered. And so, the fight for control would continue, but this time, humanity was ready. Mara stood at the edge of the observation deck once more, staring out into the black void. The stars seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. There was no turning back. Humanity had drawn its line in the sand. And now, the galaxy would know the price of crossing it.